Good evening, everyone. If you can please take your seat, we'd like to Dave, we'd like to welcome you to Police Board. Dave Snoddy, we'd like to welcome you here, but not on this table. We'd like to call our special board meeting for tabling of 2017 budget, but before we start, I'd like to thank our staff because we rescheduled this meeting from Wednesday morning to now, and they work on the weekend to get the budget line by line ready. So thank you very much, folks, and we'll turn it over to the Chief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I also want to acknowledge the great work of the finance team that put this together for a presentation today. So we are today tabling our 2017 draft budget to the board. Just from an agenda perspective, we'll give you some context on the of the budget and some operational priorities. We'll speak to the 2017 draft operating budget, and then the 2018 to 20 forecast that we always present, the 3-year outlook. Then we'll talk about the draft capital budget and 10-year forecast, and the timetables associated with the further tabling and approval and adoption. So, Mr. Chair, this next slide here, you've seen us present it at the various forums, just talks about policing today and the complexity of policing and the challenges that bring about it. And it's becoming more and more complex and increasing from the complexity perspective. If you just look at the from a demographics perspective, we have an aging population, and just this past weekend, the community we've seen us looking for an elderly person with dementia. Those are certainly increasing and having an impact on operations. The escalating violence and mainly among young men is having a critical impact on our operations. From a regulatory perspective, you look at the example of the regulated interactions, or what they used to call street checks, and imposing 8-hour training, which is unplanned, which has to be done by January 1st for us to meet the targets. If you look at the pressures from a budgetary and finance perspective, the fine efficiencies, and to ensure that we demonstrate value for money for our taxpayers. And the expectations of the community continue to vary and increase. You just look at the popping up of the marijuana dispensaries and us having to respond to those complaints, and traffic safety continues to be one of the #1 complaints. So all those factors lead us to really continue to rethink how we deliver our services, to be smarter, to use our resources where we need them. And an example is what we're doing with the service initiative and restructuring our criminal investigations unit. We launched our operations center just a couple of weeks ago, and in January 23rd we're launching our frontline deployment. So we're always looking at ways to enhance the service that we are providing to the community and ensuring that we're using our resources effectively. So in developing our 2017 budget, certainly it wasn't a budget that was easy to do. It was very challenging, and doing so and balancing the needs of our community and our members. And from the members' perspective, we hear about the staffing pressures that we have, the issues around ensuring that we deliver and support our members from a wellness perspective. And also, we talk about body cameras, and this next year we're going to fund the feasibility study to implement body cameras within our police service. It also includes, again, some efficiencies. It talks about the new ways of doing business from a transformational perspective. We have the board's business plan, which really drives the way we do business in our police service. And as always, it is focused on the operations and supporting the front line, and focused on ensuring that we keep Ottawa safe. This year, again, on the horizon, for next year, we have our 3 organizational priorities. From an operational perspective, gun and gangs is still on the radar and very much prevalent in our community. Violence against women and traffic safety. And as the board would have heard at the Finance and Audit Committee, Certainly, Canada's 150th anniversary celebrations is something that we are very mindful of, and ensuring that we are ready from an operational perspective. The service initiative will achieve a significant milestone on January 23rd, where we're implementing the frontline deployment model. And I think the last bit is around the relationships with our communities. Our officers are out there each and every day doing a great work. They're professionals. It's very difficult work and becoming even more complex. Lots of accountability, lots of eyes on them. And if you look at what's happening in policing, trust and confidence in policing is being challenged across North America. So we want to make sure that as a police service we continue to do the great work we have been doing with the community to make sure that we understand where their concerns are and where we should be putting our priorities. And as the board knows, you get quarterly reports on the service initiative, and again, we want to make sure that from a frontline perspective, we have the ability to deploy our resources where we need them and when we need them to deal with different types of crimes that are taking place. Our Strategic Operations Center, as I mentioned, was launched and has already proven to be extremely successful, and we have a lot of potential around that operation, and I know some of the board members have seen it in operation. From a demand management perspective, we're always looking at what work comes into the police service, how does it come in, and how can we better prioritize it and provide the community other opportunities to ensure that they know that they can report crimes for the police service, so we know where to deploy resources. We're always, again, looking at streamlining and improving our ability to investigate crimes, and reorganizing the Criminal Investigations Directorate was part of that. And in the court system, working alongside the judiciary and the Crown Attorney and defense to make sure that files that do go to court are processed in the most effective manner. From a 2012, I'm going to turn it over now to Deborah Fraser to go over the specifics of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'd like to begin by summarizing some of the budget achievements of the past 5 years, because you'll see that they lay the foundation for many of the themes that are contained in the 2017 budget. We start, and you'll see this continue through 2017 and through future years, that we've built in a $2 million efficiency target for 2017, and that capitalizes on some of the strategies we've used in the past. And for the past 5 years, our total efficiencies, and these are the financial ones, we've achieved $11.3 million worth of savings, and that's helped to reduce our bottom line by $11.3 million throughout those years. You'll see as well that the 2016 was the first year of our staffing strategy. We added 25 new sworn members in addition to the folks that we hired to replace retirees. There's a slide that I'll show you in a couple of minutes that outlines how that staffing strategy works and what it looks like over the next few years. The transformation projects that we've been working on do two things. Sometimes they add to the financial efficiencies that help reduce our bottom line, but often they target effectiveness. And that means that we might save person hours, which help us to redeploy personnel to other areas of the police service, as well as generating financial savings, or they help improve service to our clients. So, for example, we've implemented collision reporting centers. We now have online public reporting. We transferred our payroll function to the city. Sometimes they want to transfer it back, but it's a one-way agreement. We made that clear. And we also have online background checks coming live before the end of the year. By looking at our fleet area, we've also saved $0.8 million so far, and that's an area that we continue to work on to improve, to reduce both fuel consumption and to improve maintenance. The service initiative has been a key way that we've been able to improve efficiency, and that's more through the ability to redeploy resources and add them to areas that will help match deployment with demand. This is a new trend that's come to light and this is growth in population and growth in the population that we served. We had a look at these numbers. They come from Stats Canada as we were developing our budget and looking at our staffing strategy, because one of the things that all police services are finding across Canada is the staffing pressure that's coming to light as a result of population growth. So what this data shows here is it's a way to look at whether police services are able to keep pace with the population growth and the pressure of population growth that their city presents. So this chart shows that over the last 5 years, in many cases, population growth is growing faster than police resources are growing. And you can see that with the Ottawa in the red bar. In our case, our population growth has exceeded our resource growth for every year for the last 5 years. Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, the same trend has occurred, but in a much more significant way. In some cases, though, had the opposite experience. Hamilton, York, Gatineau, and Waterloo, they were able to keep pace with growth, and in fact their police resources exceeded their rate of growth. So we have two different experiences happening in Canada, but it seems that the larger cities are experiencing a trend where their population growth is exceeding their police resource growth, and we see Edmonton, Calgary kind of in the middle at the median. So it's one of the things that's affecting our ability as a police service to keep pace, and that's population growth. We also had a look, as we were developing the budget, on our cost comparators. And there's a great initiative in Ontario called the Municipal Benchmarking Network, and they look at all data by comparator colleagues across the province. And what we find is that Ottawa compares very favorably to other police services when all costs are measured. So the median per capita police cost across the province is $331, and in fact we are well below the provincial median at $314. We know because we're our own tax rate that that's an inclusive cost, meaning it includes everything related to policing, and as you'll see in the title, including all capital costs and including amortization. So relative to our comparators, we are well below the average cost in Ontario. One of the things that we also emphasize when we look at developing the budget and when we compare ourselves is the unique geographical situation and the range of police services that we need to offer in Ottawa. We are extremely large in terms of geography, and with this graphic we've shown that you could put 4 major cities within our boundaries, so the scope of the police territory that we need to cover is quite extensive. And as well, we have 3 different kinds of population to serve. There's an inner city that's growing significantly with a very dense population following the official plan, which calls for infilling. We have a suburban population that's becoming more expansive, and as well there's a significant rural area to cover. These all add to our policing challenges, and they're part of what we need to take into account as we develop our new deployment models. I talked about the staffing strategy that we've added to the budget, and here it is summarized kind of in one place to keep track of. We identified as we started this work that we would add 75 positions to the budget. These are new positions in addition to folks that we would hire to replace retirees, and the plan started last year in 2016. We've added 25 more positions in 2017, and our forecast for 2018 includes another 25. So that will bring the total to 75 new positions. Through the service initiative, we've been able to live up to our commitment to redeploy 25 existing sworn positions into new roles in the organization. You'll see that they form part of the new frontline deployment model, and they've come about as a result of reconfiguring other areas of the organization, taking advantage of efficiencies that have been realized through the transformation work that's going on, so that we can, through our own efforts, contribute to the new staffing requirements as well. So in total then, will be the total number of new roles in the organization will be 100, 75 through additional positions to the organization, and 25 by redeploying from within. I'm going to turn it over, the presentation over to Jeff Letourneau now. Jeff's our Chief Financial Officer, and he'll walk us through the details of the operating capital budget proposal.
Thank you, Deborah. So OPS began the budget process back in May 2016 and held several reviews with the senior leadership team over the summer and fall months. A key aspect of the budget development process was also the consultation with the board's Finance and Audit Committee. There have been 2 meetings that have been held so far, July 25th and October 12th, and there's a 3rd meeting scheduled for November 17th. During the finalization of the draft budget, there was $8 million of pressure eliminated from the final proposal. In terms of the 2017 budget highlights, the budget follows the board's direction of a 2% tax rate increase. It does include, as previously mentioned, 25 additional sworn positions, includes $2 million worth of efficiencies, includes funding for the IMIT roadmap that began back in 2015, so there's the continuation of that funding stream. It also includes the continuation of the funding for the facility strategic plan, which also began back in 2012 from a funding perspective. As also previously mentioned, there's funding included for the implementation of the various strategic service initiative programs as well. And lastly, one of the most challenging issues that we dealt with through the budget was Canada's 150th celebrations. There was $1.5 million in costs identified in the budget based on known events today, and those have been funded with external third-party revenues. This table summarizes the budget highlights on one page. In a nutshell, the overall net budget increase is $8.9 million. The net operating budget is at $285.9 million. This leads to a 2% police tax rate increase, and the tax increase on the average homeowner is $11. Slide 16 summarizes the details underlying the $8.9 million budget increase. The changes are categorized in accordance with the City of Ottawa reporting format. Maintaining existing service levels creates an incremental requirement of $7.1 million for 2017. The majority of this $7.1 million is related to compensation costs, such as a reasonable provision for contract settlements, as well as the costs associated with members moving through the various steps. The cost of the 25 officers, $2.1 million, reflects the timing of officers spread out over hiring in April and September. $1.3 million in costs is associated with the increase to the complement, and a further $800,000 is related to the cost of the progression for the 25 officers hired in 2016. The IMIT roadmap is included for $2 million. $1.3 million relates to pay-as-you-go contribution to support the implementation of capital projects in the roadmap, and a further $700,000 is included to address the increased operating costs related to the new technologies that will be implemented. There's $2 million of efficiencies identified, as well as $300,000 of user fees and charges. That sums to $8.9 million, and as previously mentioned, we're also highlighting the $1.5 million associated with the cost to police Canada's 150th celebrations for 10 known events. Those are offset with one-time revenue of $1.5 million. Slide 17 provides additional breakdown on the gross operating budget. The total is $320.2 million. 81%, or $258 million, is related to compensation. $26 million, or 8%, is with material supplies and services, 7% or 24 million for financial charges, and 12 million or 4% or costs associated with the city. Now, slide 18 was included as per request from member Durrell, and the chart highlights the OPS net requirement as a percentage of the city net requirement. What it shows is that the trend is very flat and ranges between 18.6 and 18.7% over the time period. I'll now move on and talk about the 2018-2020 draft operating forecast. So the OPS continues to provide a 3-year forecast as part of the budget proposal. The forecast for the 2018 to 2020 period is based on the following: reasonable provision for contract settlements, continuation of the 2016 plan to expand the sworn officer complement, continuation of the IMIT roadmap funding, along with $2 million of annual efficiencies carried throughout the forecast period. When all these factors are taken into account, the tax rate forecast ranges between 2.3 and 2.7%, or roughly $10 million. I'll now move along to talk about capital. The 2017 capital budget is proposed at $20.3 million, funded largely from the General Reserve Pay-As-You-Go Fund, with a small amount coming from debt. The capital budget can be broken down into 2 categories: the renewal of assets and strategic initiatives. And the renewal of assets, $3.3 million associated with the fleet program, $2.2 million related to IT infrastructure and telecom, and a further $2.2 million associated with the facility lifecycle program. On the strategic side, it totals $12.6 million. $6.8 million relates to the IMIT roadmap. The facility strategic plan amount of $5.4 million, and a majority of this relates to the refit of the Queensview site, for a total of $20.3 million. Moving on to the 10-year capital forecast, this totals $262.5 million, with 65% being funded through pay-as-you-go and 34% being funded with debt and a small portion funded through revenue. This can be broken down at $77 million associated with the renewal of assets, and this carries on with what I just showed you on the previous slide: the fleet, the IT infrastructure, as well as the facility life cycle. Growth comes in at $60 million, and this is largely the second phase of the South facility associated with the facility strategic plan. And then strategic initiatives at $125 million can be broken out between the IMIT roadmap as a significant chunk of that, as well as the corporate facility and central patrol projects as part of the facility strategic plan. I'll now move along to the timetable. So we're tabling the budget today with the board. The tabling with City Council will occur on November 9th. We have a Finance and Audit Committee meeting scheduled for November 17th as a follow-up to the budget tabling. November 28th, board meeting with public delegations and approval of the 2017 budget, followed by December 14th at City Council with approval of the 2017 budget. So with that, before I close, Mr. Chair, I would just like to recognize a few individuals that contributed significantly to putting the budget together. Mr. Wally Salem, Sheila Hamilton, Valerie McCallum, Jonathan Sweet, along with Owen Bell. contributed significantly, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the translators and print shop that worked diligently today to pull the documents together. So thank you, everyone, for your tremendous efforts.
Thank you, and on behalf of our colleague, we'd like to thank you and all your team. Folks, today is November 7, is the draft budget for 2017. To provide an opportunity for question on the draft budget, the Ottawa Police Service Board Finance and Audit Committee will be holding a meeting at 12 p.m. on November 17 in the Colonel By Room at the City Hall. As the police budget affects the entire city of Ottawa, all councillors has been invited to attend and ask questions of the board, police chief, and staff. And I'd like to recognize tonight we have three of my colleagues here, Councillor Egli, Councillor Brockington, and Councillor Manette. As a chair, my goal is to encourage transparency and give my council colleagues more opportunity to engage with the chief, who is always ready to answer their question. Council have also been invited to attend and ask questions at the board regular meeting on November 28 at 4 p.m. at the Champlain Room here, when the budget will be considered. We have a couple of questions for clarification, and I think we'll start with Councillor Turney. Councillor Turney?
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this presentation today. First of all, I'm happy to see that the 25 officers are within the budget, and maybe this is a question towards to Jill or to Chuck in regards to, do you feel 25 officers is enough, especially in light of the number of homicides this year within the city? Again, we've had another one, and unfortunately, I hate to report it's in my ward yet again at Piper's. Do we feel 25 is enough officers?
Sure, that's a question we get a lot. And as far as, do you have enough officers and can you use more officers? Absolutely, you can always use more officers. I think the question is, with the officers we have, are we using them in the most effective way that we can? And we've taken a cautious and a prudent and a responsible way to grow our police service by 75 officers over the 3 years, while at the same time taking a hard look at how we are doing business and being smarter at it. And I think we'll be in a better position, as you saw the forecast with respect to growth. Once we see the fruits of the service initiative being implemented, continuing with some other transformational projects, I would say by 2018 we'll be in a better position to ascertain whether or not we need to continue growing the police service or becoming more aggressive in growing it. Calls for service are fairly stable, if not declining a bit, but crime is changing and the complexity of crime is changing. One example I use is, last year it just took a phone call to get an ISP address from a telco, and now it takes 3 days because you have to write a warrant, get the warrant, and execute the warrant. So it is getting more complex. So we're monitoring that very closely, and we'll continue to assess whether or not we need to grow the police service once we see the benefits of the service initiative.
Great, and thank you for that. I think that's very important to make sure that we keep reassessing, because unfortunately you're very correct. I think crime is changing. It's not what it was. It's online. It's in many different places, not the same as the traditional policing of 20 years ago. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I did have a follow-up question in regards to 2017, and I think councillors we've been very excited for the amount of stuff that's going to take place in the city. We're going to have a multitude of events. We've heard recently about one that's going to take place at local arenas in neighborhoods like mine and like Councillor Harder's. Have we appropriately assessed what the overtime needs or what the needs of policing would be? And I know it's a bit of you got to try to pull a number out of the air, how many more cops are going to be required in certain areas. But let's face it, if you're putting a lot of people in one place, the opportunity for an incident to occur does exist. Have we factored this into overtime budgets or budgets in general?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that you're excited. We're getting ulcers with the number of events that are being planned, but it is, we have an inspector that's in charge of working along with Ottawa 2017. We have assessed, I think, identified 10 major events in 2017. I think there's how many events? 1,200 events taking place, and there's a matrix that we work with the C team to understand exactly what are the security requirements for each of those events, and a lot of them don't require police presence at all. So we've narrowed it down to about 10 major events, and I know of other events that are being discussed that could potentially have fairly significant impact on our community if they go ahead. We've got, I think, an estimated $1.5 million identified to deal with these 10 major events, and our approach is that they will be funded by external sources of revenue, whether it's paid duty or other levels of government, and we'll continue to assess those as new events are brought to our attention.
And thank you for that, Chief, and I appreciate that, because as we learn about certain events in the city as councillors, we sometimes learn at the same time as you. And that being said, for example, this camping situation on Canada Day, I feel very strongly that we have to ensure that we've either budgeted time or overtime around this specific issue, assuming that it does pass the council. As new numbers come in, I mean, now it's kind of the cutoff. We're at the end of the year. Have you factored this into possible calls?
Well, again, I think those events, as they come in, our plan is that any event associated with Canada 2017, the 150th anniversary, is over and above our operating budget. We will seek external sources of revenue to fund those, and that's the approach we've taken. And if those extra sources of revenue are not forthcoming, then we'll run a deficit on that line. I think Director General Fraser has another point.
Thank you, Chief. I just wanted to emphasize that, and I went back to the slide in the presentation. Right now, based on the information we have, we're estimating that it will take $1.5 million worth of overtime to deal with the events that are on the table. So on the expense side, it's $1.5 million. As information changes, that expense side will change. I doubt it will go down. I imagine it's going to go up. So as we get updates, we'll bring that to the board. What we're assuming is that those funds will be recovered from other levels of government. And we've been talking to our city partners about how to handle a one-time, for us, significant issue. And we've agreed that this is the approach to take. To the extent that other levels of government do not provide and cover those costs, we will, at the end of the year, have a deficit related to Canada 150th celebrations that we'll discuss with the city. So I don't want to leave the board with the impression that this is solved.
Mr. Chair, I'll use one example. So the hockey game that was advocated to go on Parliament Hill, that was good news for us because that's an RCMP responsibility. That is not taking place. And now, so if it's located anywhere else in their city, then that isn't on that is not part of that plan. So we would have to add that one as a significant major event for us to police.
And thank you for that. I'm glad that's in front of us, because I think that's very important to recognize. Is it's still changing. We could be setting our budgets now, but we're not at the end of the year, and we haven't established what's going to happen next year. So I'm hoping we're very conservative in our assumptions, because unfortunately when you assume, that's a lot of risk, and it is a bit of a crapshoot. So I thank you for that. Thank you, Deborah, for all the work you've done on this file, and fingers crossed we come in within budget.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shani. So we learned something today. The 1.5 million, that's a very low number, and it's going to be going higher. Councillor Hudder.
I have a question on behalf of Councillor Brockington. He's just wondering why we can't ensure that that all events are cost recovery. So why can we not do an estimate and make sure that if the police are going to be involved, that we make sure that it is cost recoverable?
So, Mr. Chair, what we have done is all the events that require police presence, at a increased level is cost recoverable, and that's what we've identified. There'll be many community events that are taking place that don't require any policing presence whatsoever. So these are the ones where we've identified the major one where public safety, there's an elevated risk, and and the other piece as far as the changing threat landscape, it is where it is now, and we saw with the attacks in Nice and other areas that could change very quickly. So we have to adjust and adapt to that changing landscape that exists abroad and here in Canada. So we've mapped out the majority of the events that are going to impact policing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So thank you very much, folks. And we have Councillor Egli has asked me earlier today he would like to not asking question but present something today on the board and committee at the board meeting. So and Councillor Egli would still like you to come in on November 17 and November 24th. That's an open invitation to
and that's absolutely my intention as well. And I thank you for the indulgence. The reason I'm here is two of my community associations and the umbrella organization of my community associations, the Knoxdale Mayoral Council, asked me if I could deliver a series of 3 letters to the members of the committee and also to the overall board, and I'll send electronic copies to Ms. Fedek so that can be done. But I have hard copies here for the committee members, and I promised the chair I wouldn't ask any questions because I'm not really supposed to be here, so I won't. But all the letters speak to the same issue, and that is there is a real concern in my community, and I think in other communities in the city, you've heard me on this before, about the changes to the community policing officers. There's a perception out there that community policing officers are going to be reduced by 33%, and there's a real fear that that's going to impact on the way that the service operates, and not in a good way. And so that's why I'm here, to present that message, to pass out these letters and let that percolate in the board's head and the committee's head as they prepare to deliberate the budget at a later date. So I'll just leave the copies of the letter with Ms. Fedek, and I'll send an electronic copy for the balance of the commission. Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the indulgence.
Thank you very much, Councillor Egli. And again, folks, as a direction from the mayor on the budget to all committee chairs, would like all councillors to attend either the board meeting or the Finance FAC Budget Committee. That's when we can have a dialogue and we have exchange with council. So that's going to be on November 17, and the board meeting is going to be on November 28. So I would invite all my council colleagues to attend those, very important. And also the chief and his team will be attending on a budget day on December 14. But hopefully we don't have to ask question about why is the car at the corner of Osgood, and when we're talking about $350 million budget. So I hope all the questions be asked on a board meeting or on a committee meeting. With that, this will be the last board meeting. Councillor Harder will be with us due to the workload on the planning committee, which is a lot thankless job than this job is here, but nevertheless, she's very busy, and I want to thank her on behalf all the board member and staff for good job, and I really appreciate your serving with us in the last 6 years, Councillor. With that, you can say something if you promise me you don't make me cry, but go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that it's been a real honor to serve on the Ottawa Police Services Board for the past 6 years, and I wish that I could stay. But I think that other than probably Councillor Tierney and Councillor Hubley, nobody really understands the scope of the job of planning chair for the 4th largest city in Canada, and with everything that comes before us, and as individual councillors, some of the ones even that were sitting here, the files that I help them with on a daily basis. And I know how much, and I've said this to the chair for a number of years, I wish I could do more. I wish I could be at more police service events. I wish that I could contribute more because I know that I have a lot more to give. That's just the kind of person that I am. I grew up with an ethic of a job worth doing is a job worth doing well. And Councillor Hubely has got more time and an eagerness that I know will serve you well, and so I'm passing the torch to him, and have many fond memories of the good work that all of you do every single day to serve our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harder. Chief, last word for you this time.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councillor Harder, thank you very much. On behalf of the women and men who serve our community each and every day, thank you so much for what you have done with the board and for our community as a member of the board. We really appreciate it, and I know that all the other work in the community that you're doing will continue, and I know that you'll continue to speak well about the police service and support us. So thank you.
I thought you'll have the last word, but Councillor Cherney jump in. Councillor Cherney.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to my seatmate, Jan. She's guided me through a lot, and I'm still her seatmate on planning, so I can attest to the tremendous amount of work you have on the planning committee. And I also want to thank you for making sure we got these nifty badges to wear as board members. I think that's very important for us. But in all honesty, you've been a tremendous support. You've taught me a lot, and I'll hold that flame, pressing here at the police board in the future. I'm sure I will as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And earlier, I didn't ask you for declaration of interest, but I'm sure just to receiving the budget. All right, we heard. So that the Ottawa Police Service Board receive and table the Ottawa Police Service 2017 draft operating and capital budgets to be considered at the board meeting on 28 November 2016, but we have the Finance Audit Committee meeting on November 17. I will encourage you all to attend. Again, thank you, staff. Thank you, Councillor Hart, from the bottom of my heart for all your work here, and we wish you well. Thank you, folks.